Good morning and happy Sabbath. Here we are, the 12th lesson already in the quarter. One more and we're done. If you care to join the Zoom Sabbath School class, it's presently underway. The meeting ID and passcode are in the weekly electronic newsletter. You can check those out if you care to join them. Otherwise, you're stuck with us.
We're so glad that there are a good number of you who join us every Sabbath, and we really hope that you get a blessing, but
Indeed.
we wish that we were back together so that we could share even more.
Come on, vaccine.
Yeah. But let's go ahead and begin with prayer. Father, thank you so much for today. It's a beautiful day, and we're always thankful that you're with us.
Yes.
Any day that's Sabbath is a joy. And I pray today that you'll send your Spirit to guide our minds and our hearts, convict our hearts that it is on Sabbath that we can best enjoy your great creation and the promise that you will recreate in us. We ask that as we go through this lesson that you'll help us commit information and conviction in our hearts. For we pray in your name. Amen.
Sabbath, experiencing and living the character of God.
The memory text is from Mark 2:27 and 28. And he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Therefore, the Son of Man is also Lord of the Sabbath. I was thinking about, the logic that goes behind any statement like this, where we have the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Therefore, there's always a therefore in a logic. And I think that it's one of the things that God wants us to begin to really understand is he's not doing it as an arbitrary, I made 6 days of creations and now I'm creating a Sabbath and you better follow through. You better do what I say. It was an opportunity for us to literally have nothing else to do but spend the day with him. That's what he wanted in the new creation, in the new world. And sometimes we forget that that's what he really wants. He wants friends to be with him. And it's what we want. And we can't wait to get back together with our friends.
Indeed. And Sabbath, as the world continued, truly did become a day of rest from one's labor and for, indeed, not only our physical, but our mental well-being as well. And as we have studied the circadian rhythm of the human over the decades or centuries, dare I say, we've discovered that, wow, it's on a 7-day cycle.
National Geographic did a whole segment on that about, it's probably been almost 15 years ago.
More than that. Closer to 30, probably.
I don't think it's that long.
Where they put him down in the cave?
No.
Oh, different story.
Yeah. But when you look at the idea of the circadian rhythm, maybe they've done many, I don't know. But you could probably look it up on their website in their information. But it's interesting to think about how God not only created night and day, but he also created a time where our bodies, it's like a little time clock in us that says we need a day off. We need a down day.
I have that 7 days a week, dear.
I don't.
I'm ready for retirement.
No, you're not.
Yeah, I am. In any case, Tracy's not ready for me to retire. That's the real issue. We better get back to Sabbath and the lesson study.
Okay.
I love the little introductory story, if you're following along, it's on page 96 in your quarterly, of how 6 days she was in town working, and Friday night, Sabbath is coming very soon. And then she realized over 4 Friday nights she experienced the something new every time in her Christian experience. I didn't really appreciate Sabbath. I went to college, and I had a good reason not to study then.
Yeah.
It really was a day of rest and being taking time to be with God. It totally was different than it had been any other time in my life. And this lesson brought some things home that I had not thought about in a long time, and some new ideas too that we'll be sharing, that at least I'll be sharing as we progress in the lesson.
Well, I don't want to ruin your thunder, but do you remember the man with two umbrellas?
Of course, I'm not going there.
Oh, but it's a beautiful story about, when you can engage people in the Sabbath, it's not just come to church with me, but to enjoy the fellowship, the expanded experience of what Sabbath means. It's not about being Adventist, it's about engaging with God in different ways. And Sunday's lesson is very much about that.
I never thought that the first 2 chapters in Genesis really were 2 different creation stories until I reread through this lesson portion, and wow, it really was. And I got to thinking, I wonder if that was the literary technique of Moses' time or King James' time in the translation to English. But the very fact that here we have the first week where God is saying and all these things are happening, he creates man then not by speaking but by forming with his hands and giving him the breath of life. And then all the beauties of nature created.
Well, and the second part is about God creating relationships and giving purpose to the relationships and talking about the love and the care that goes with creation, not just for the animals and for the soil and fruit trees and whatever, but also the fact that God wants us to have an opportunity to engage and not just go, wow, God, you're amazing. But he wants us to engage with him.
And what did he do? He came to talk with Adam and Eve every day.
Yeah.
In the cool of the evening.
And they have you imagine what it must have been like to be Adam and Eve and start out looking around that first day and God coming to talk about what he wanted in this Sabbath time and what Sabbath would bring to their relationship. Not just Adam and Eve's, but Adam and Eve's with God.
The very last paragraph on that page, the first Sabbath could not have been a passive experience for Adam and Eve. I think growing up as a kid, and probably true for most children, especially now when parents are so work weary, especially with the additional fatigue of perhaps having to work from home and staring in front of a computer screen for hours on end, that it's more a day of physical rest for many adults. Yeah. And the kids are like, nah, let's go. That's not what Sabbath is meant to be. And I think that this lesson kind of challenges parents to make Sabbath truly a delight for their children. And later in the lesson, I'll share a couple things that I remember from my childhood that really, really, really made Sabbath a wonderful time. And we'll get there. But yeah, it focused on God, and the God created the opportunity to focus on the Creator, what he had done, to remember. Now we think back to the creation, but we also have to look forward to the new creation.
We have so many advantages, and I think, even if you're not able to get out in nature, so to speak, you're not able to go walking for miles on end. Today we have so many opportunities with what we have with Google Earth, with what we have with National Geographic and, the planet Earth videos and whatever. We can see the wonders of God. We can experience
and
them.
Don't just think about Earth. Think of the solar system too. There are some amazing things from NASA that on their website, if you go and look through the Hubble telescope images,
they are astounding.
And
I just saw a new one about Pluto, and it was like this multicolored blob, and I thought, wow, look at all the colors on that. How many? And they're just like modeled around. It was just very interesting.
And that's just our little solar system, perhaps our little galaxy even. And there are hundreds of billions of known stars and galaxies in the known universe. And notice I said known universe because it's just mind-boggling.
Yeah.
When you think about the Milky Way galaxy in particular, from what we believe to be true, our Milky Way galaxy is a spiral galaxy about 100,000 light years across. And what that means is it take you 100,000 years to travel across it, traveling at the speed of light, which, by the way, is about 5.4 trillion miles in one light year. So 100,000
Yeah.
if you could travel the speed of light. That's just our little galaxy here, the Milky Way.
Yeah. And if you think about
God, what a time for Sabbath to spend in doing that.
Yeah, and he wants us, and the lesson for Sunday really emphasizes the fact that we should be astonished. We should be in awe of all the things that God creates. And I think, we have opportunity, even though we're in lockdown, we can still go out and we can still be outside. Even if we set our lawn chairs, 6 or 8 feet apart and shout across. It's a wonderful way to be able to be out in nature, be able to appreciate, the leaves this year we have red ones outside our front door, but there are some really beautiful liquid ambers in Newbury Park. And I was going through, and the winds have been tremendous this week. And the leaves are just blowing all over the place. And it was so beautiful. And I thought, it's one of the things I miss about the Northwest and the beauty that's there. And so going to Monday's lesson, it takes us to the rediscovery of maybe what we've already known for a long time.
Well, and it starts, of course, where God was calling his people to rediscover with the Israelites from Egyptian slavery. They had been there almost 400 years. I don't remember how long they had been slaves. It's many generations. And the idea of Sabbath was almost obliterated from the people.
Yeah.
And God called them out of that so they could rediscover what Sabbath meant. The experience they had in the wilderness, the next 40 years, and then the 40 years after that.
It does a beautiful job, though, of giving them a very hands-on, practical vision of Sabbath. And it comes through the story of the quail and the manna.
Oh, I hope not the quail. That was a horrible ending.
Well, yes, that's true.
And
but the manna was a nice thing.
She's looking at Exodus 16
Yes.
presently, the first thing there in the quarterly on page
So if you go to
98.
14, and when the dew had gone up, there was in the face of the wilderness a fine flake-like thing, fine as hoarfrost on the ground. Now I don't know if you know what that looks like, because California doesn't get a lot of
No, we don't.
that kind of frost. But anyway,
You're out of the frame.
yeah, when the people of the Israel saw it, they said to one another, "What is it?" They did not know what it was. And Moses said to them, "It is the bread which the Lord has given you to eat." So you might say it was like flour sprinkled around. Now, I don't know if I'd want to pick up flour like that, but this is what the Lord commanded. "Gather it, every man of you, as much as he can eat. You shall take an omer apiece, according to the number of persons whom each of you has in his tent." And the people of Israel did so. They gathered, some more, some less. But when they measured it with an omer, he that had gathered much had nothing left over, and he that gathered little had no lack. Each gathered according to what he could eat. And Moses said to them, "Let no man leave any of it until morning." But they didn't listen to Moses. I'm surprised. Some parts of it till morning, and it bred worms and became foul. And Moses was angry with them. Morning by morning they gathered it, each as much as he could eat. But when the sun grew hot, it melted. And then it goes on to the Sabbath day, or the 6th day. On the 6th day they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers apiece. And when all the leaders of the congregation came and told Moses, he said to them, "This is what the Lord has commanded. Tomorrow is a day of solemn rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you will bake and boil what you will boil, and all that is left over lay by to be kept until morning. So they laid it by until morning, and as Moses bade them, and it did not become foul, and there was no worms in it. And Moses said, Eat it today, for the day is Sabbath to the Lord. Today you will not find it in the field. 6 days you shall gather it, but on the seventh, which is the Sabbath, there shall be none. On the seventh day, some of the people went out to gather, and they found none. And the Lord said to Moses, How long do you refuse to keep my commandments and my laws? See, the Lord is giving you the Sabbath. Therefore, on the 6th day, he gives you bread for 2 days. Remain every man of you in his place. Let no man go out of his place on the 7th day. So the people rested on the 7th day.
So there you see the tradition started way back in the days of just out of Egypt, the bagel. They had to boil it. But where I was actually going with that is the fact that still today, traditional Jewish households will do no food preparation on Sabbath. They do it all on Friday, and they eat cold meals on Sabbath because lighting a flame to cook and cooking and preparing the food would be doing work.
Was part of the Levitical law.
So here they get that instruction: gather it on the 6th day and prepare it for the 7th day, and it'll be ready for you to go.
I was thinking about college. We'd go down to Rogers Bakery, and then Kate Larson.
She went to the conservative schools in the Northwest. We had regular food on Sabbath at La Sierra.
Or Kay and I would go down to Albertsons and buy their big loaves of French bread, and we would bring that back. Sometimes it made it to Sabbath, but not always. But it was a wonderful, way to look at Friday and preparing for Sabbath. And that concept is one that I think we've kind of let go by, because we work right up and dance right on the Sabbath hours, except for, in the summer when it's
now,
so long.
When, sundown's like 4:45, 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
It's very, very early. But I think that what struck me most on this particular lesson is down toward the very end, where it says part of the purpose of this, not just the manna, but God drawing the Israelites away, having a day of rest, reminding them, was to rediscover who they were, their identity in God and with God. Yeah. Remembering they were his people and he was their God.
I think maybe in this lesson at the end it says, you're talking to a teenager who's finding Sabbath boring. What do you say? And I remember, when the girls were younger, we would get things ready so that we could have fun on Sabbath. And I think maybe we've gone about it backwards of all the things you're not supposed to do, but thinking about how can we prepare and anticipate that it will be a pleasant day, a fun day, a day to do things that we don't normally do as a family, but also that we can share God in that time.
Growing up, there were some favorite places we used to like to go on walks, and we'd take our dogs and let them run because there was no other people really around. We didn't leave the city, but there were places we could go still in Glendale in that time, and in nearby Pasadena, Altadena, and so forth, where we could let our dogs run and have a wonderful time. And I remember those walks, those hikes, and things that we would do and places we would go. So there is some planning, but that's something that parents need to do desperately today for their children. Yeah. And while
it's harder in the city.
No, of course it is. But it just takes a little bit of planning to really make Sabbath a time that will create memories where the child will look back as they move forward in their adult life to, oh yeah, Sabbath.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My dad was a big visitor. He loved to go visit. And so he'd say, you want to go for a ride? And I was always up for going somewhere. And so I'd go with him, and he'd go visit some of the older people in church or people that he didn't normally get to visit with that maybe weren't Adventists, but, they were acquaintances of his that he had known for years. And I remember that it was like there was always something new that was going to happen, always someplace new to go. And that helped me anticipate what might happen on Sabbath.
And I think as you look back perhaps on your own childhood Sabbath, you might remember some times that weren't so engaging, so to speak, depending upon how you were brought up. You know, there were the very conservative Adventists of the 60s and 70s who, you couldn't do anything on Sabbath. And so as Tracy and I moved forward in our adult life and started to have our children, our first house had a swimming pool, and we lived in Thousand Oaks, and it could get warm in the spring and summertime. And I remember one Sabbath we called as we were out on our pool area, and I don't know if her parents who we were speaking with heard the girls splashing in the pool or whatnot, or we said, "Oh, it's so hot down here, and we're in the pool to cool off. We're not having any fun."
Yeah, but that was mostly because I had a couple of relatives that, even on Sabbath, the girls had to keep their Sabbath shoes on. And, we might walk 5 miles. And there they were in their Sabbath shoes going down the railroad tracks, trying not to get their heels ruined. And
the
it
point
was tough.
Yeah,
it was really
the
tough.
point of Sabbath is, I love that, to rediscover your identity and your God.
Yeah.
Wow. How do we do that? How do we do that? And that kind of goes right into Tuesday's lessons by using Sabbath to learn our priorities.
Yeah. And, when we look at this, there's a long text, again, Isaiah 58. And it says 1 through 14. What is God saying to his people here that is relevant today? Well, starting with 13 and 14, that's what I would have looked at. Because the first part of the chapter, well, listen to this. Cry aloud, spare not, lift up your voice like a trumpet. Declare to my people their transgressions, to the house of Jacob their sins. Doesn't that sound happy? And yet they seek me daily and delight to know my ways, as if they were a nation that did righteousness and did not forsake the ordinance of their God. They ask me for righteous judgments. They delight to draw near to God. Why have we fasted? Why hast thou seest not? Why have we humbled ourselves? Thou takest no knowledge of it. Behold, in the day of your fast, you seek your own pleasure and oppress all your workers. Behold, you fast only to quarrel and to fight and to hit with wicked fists. Fasting like yours this day will not make your voice be heard on high. Is such the fast that I choose, a day for man to humble himself? Is it to bow down his head like a rush, to spread sackcloth and ashes under him? Will you call this a fast, a day acceptable to the Lord? And it keeps going on just like this, all the way. And he goes on to talk about, in this section, how if you fast correctly, it brings glory to him.
Well, it sounds to me that he's pointing out they're doing all these things for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
And they're to no avail. The lesson quarterly asks you to compare that to Jeremiah 17:19 through 27, which is a little different picture altogether. It talks about how we keep Sabbath, remember the Sabbath day, and so forth, and what we do. And part of it is the fact, of course, that they went on to the temple worship service.
In the same way. So if you go to 13 and 14, the end of that Isaiah 58, if you turn back your foot from the Sabbath, from doing your pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, and the holy day of the Lord honorable, if you honor it, not going your own ways, or seeking your own pleasure, or talking idly, then you shall take delight in the Lord, and I will make you ride upon the heights of the earth. I will feed you with the heritage of Jacob your father, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken. So then you get the people who are like, see, I told you, you're not supposed to do anything fun. You're not supposed to enjoy the time. You're not supposed to talk idly. We need to be quiet and meditate.
The point is, though, the 8th word of the commandment is holy. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. That means to set it aside, to make it separate, to make it specially dedicated to God. And looking at nature, looking at God's whole creation, he's a God of amazing humor. I mean, look at some of the animals. Look at some of the flowers. Look at some of the trees. Look how they grow. Look at how the genetic patterns of humanity even. God is a great humorist, and to say that you're not supposed to enjoy it and have a good time, I think is denying God Himself. So the very fact that it's a day that we should, as it says in Isaiah there, turn thy foot from the regular stuff. But that doesn't mean you still can't have fun, because, I mean, I don't envision Jesus as telling stories like, and then the father said to the son, I will prepare a banquet, go kill the fatted calf. I see him as a man of great humor, except in the very trying times, with always a smile on his face.
Yeah.
So I have a problem with that, not having any fun.
Well,
They have somber reflection and duty.
so don't go my own way. What could that mean? And doing as you please or speak idle words. Maybe it's the conversations that we have about our daily life, not so much as in building relationships, but as in, oh, I saw this video game and it was really great, and I saw this movie, and
Oh, did you see the sale downtown?
yeah, those kinds of conversations that maybe we need to reevaluate our conversations for Sabbath. That, make them uplifting, make them about experiences that have benefited
Moving
us.
away from the routine, making Sabbath day truly special. We started growing up as a kid. We started our Sabbath day with breakfast. We had a special breakfast on Sabbath. We had no other time of the week, and that was one way it was special.
It was special because Thom made it for us when we had the girls.
I never had hot cross buns, but that's
No, but you made lovely, lovely food for the girls. And every Sabbath morning, that was Thom's gift to me.
Different day. But anyway, that delight, that separation, that holy is setting it aside, making it a day that is not like Monday or Sunday through Friday, but a day in which truly is a way in which we can learn of what is most important in life here and the life to come. Learning our living priorities. How can we honor the Sabbath? How can we honor God on that day?
And I know that, especially being on our own, we're just enclosed in our houses, and we're not out visiting with our friends. We're not, gathering, and sometimes that makes it hard to separate Sabbath, because it's just like every other day that we've been in our houses and locked down. But figuring out a way to make it special in spite of what's going on. So I encourage you to talk about that with your family. What can you do to make, even though we're quarantined right now, and in LA County it's, don't go anywhere, don't have any fun.
Well, don't go anywhere, period, except for the groceries and medicine.
But when we look at it, how can we benefit Sabbath? What can we do that can engage us in other ways?
And part of that lends itself in finding a way in which we can have a balanced life still, despite what COVID has done to us since last spring. Late winter, early spring. And Wednesday's lesson, time for finding balance. Maybe Sabbath should be somewhat of a day of reflection for a period of time where we can think about what we need to do to bring us back into balance if we're out of balance.
Well, one of those ways is service. And when we look at Matthew, the story in Matthew, I was
looking at Matthew
reading
5
through
or 12.
12.
Matthew 12, starting at verse 1, the lesson directs us there, through verse 13.
And this is the Jews with Lord of the Sabbath. At the time Jesus went through the grain fields on Sabbath, his disciples were hungry and they began to pluck heads of grain and to eat. By the way,
Well,
that's
they weren't just plucking; they also were thrashing it by rubbing it in their hands.
well,
as I
that's what you
recall
have
the
to
story.
do.
Yes.
By the way, that's really yummy. When I was a girl, we had some neighbors
I
who
don't know.
had a grain field, and we'd sometimes pull one off, and when it's
Thrash
dry,
it in your hands.
yes, and those little kernels are so yummy. They were really delicious.
Well, the point of this was the Pharisees or rabbis or someone saw him and said that he was letting his disciples work on the Sabbath day.
Yeah, and it's not lawful to do it. And haven't you read what David did when he was hungry?
This is
And
Jesus
those,
speaking.
yeah, how he entered the house of God and ate the bread of the presence, which
Ate the showbread.
it was not lawful for him to eat, nor for those who were with him, but only for the priests. Or have you not read in the law how on the Sabbath, the priests in the temple profane the Sabbath and are guiltless? I tell you, something greater than the temple is here. And if you'd known what this mean, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless. For the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. And that Lord of the Sabbath,
How is Lord written there? Is it
lowercase.
the L is lowercase? I'm going to look at a different version.
When you look at that, by the way, that's verse 8. When you look at this, he goes on and talks about there was a man in the synagogue with a withered hand.
I have capital L in my Bible.
Well, yeah.
Yes.
He had a withered hand, and then the conversation, is it lawful to heal on Sabbath? And
Of course, they said yes. By all means, it's doing good.
and how much more is this man valuable? And the man stretched out his hand and it was healed. And then it goes on and talks about all the places that Jesus goes and heals and how important that is to the story. And then if you go over to Luke 13,
And while you're turning to Luke 13, the teacher's edition talks in the teacher's help that there are, of the 89 chapters, or 80, in the Gospels, 11 instances are told where Jesus did some amazing things on Sabbath. And they say that's a ratio of 8 chapters of the Gospel.
yeah,
So that's almost 10% of the gospel record. Jesus is working on Sabbath. Jesus did many things that are written in the book of John, and the earliest gospel was probably written some 30 years after Jesus' death. And putting those two facts together, it's amazing to realize that it's teaching us something
yeah.
about Sabbath.
Doing
and God
good on the
wanted that to
Sabbath.
be brought forward in the record, so to speak.
Yeah. And his healing was not only physical. And I think that's the one part that maybe we need to recognize. Well, I can't necessarily heal an infirmed person. I can certainly, let the Spirit use me to bring about maybe spiritual healing or emotional healing in some way. And if you go to Luke 13:10, we have the woman who had had a spirit of infirmity for 18 years. She was bent over and could not straighten herself. And, physically, anybody who has had, arthritis, anybody who has gotten older, knows that there are times where, your body just won't do what you want to. And the ruler of the synagogue, indignant because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath, said to the people, "There are 6 days on which the work should be done. So why did they not come on one of those days and not on the Sabbath?" And this is what Jesus' response was. "You hypocrites, does not each one of you on the Sabbath untie his ox or ass from the manger and lead it away to water it? And ought not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, who Satan bound for 18 years, be loosed from this bond on the Sabbath day? As he said this, all his adversaries were put to shame, and all the people rejoiced at the glorious things that were done by him. Comparing a woman to an animal, is there a comparison?
And that's his point. That's his point indeed. Here's a daughter of Abraham who had this infirmity, and isn't it a good thing to do? I mean, you're going to help an animal as its needs are taken care of. How much more is she in need? It's like he said, even bad parents don't give their children stones when they ask for bread.
Yeah.
So he's making the point that the Sabbath should be a time of restoration, a time of healing. And the Sabbath goes on the lesson goes on to point out that the Sabbath was not to be a burden.
Yeah.
The Pharisees at Jesus' time had made, the religious leaders, whether it be Pharisees or priests or scribes or whomever, over 300 rules to keep Sabbath. And it was so ridiculous by today's standard for people to do things they needed to do on Sabbath, because the Sabbath, you'd only go so far on a Sabbath day's journey, which I believe is about a quarter mile. And so you may see in towns around that have a synagogue with large Jewish populations, you might see small assembly places in near places of residence, so people can walk there just a quarter mile or so away, but they couldn't make it to the synagogue. In any case, they would take a piece of bread and wrap it and put it someplace, and hopefully it would stay there for the next day, so they could have a meal, quote, a meal, because wherever you had a meal, that was your home. And then they'd go to the quarter mile and put another piece of bread down until their journey was complete. Or, since you could travel further over water, since traveling over water took less work because you could use the wind power than riding an animal or walking, they would sit on a water bottle and ride their horse. That's kind of crazy. The point is not, again, don't do this, don't do that. But remember the Sabbath day. Set it aside. Make it a special day. Not a day full of burden trying to keep all these laws and rules and everything else.
Yeah. Well, and I think when we look at the idea that Sabbath is a time for us to get to know God better, how do we do that? We experience that in a lot of ways. We experience that through communication with other people and learning about their life, their testimony of what God has done. We learn that through observing things in nature. We observe that through Bible study. We can do it so many different ways. And I think that's what Wednesday's lesson is talking about. Finding a way to balance it out. If I had to do a 10-mile hike every Sabbath, I would grow to hate Sabbath. I'll be honest with you. When I was younger, we used to go in the summer, we climbed up mountains every Sabbath. Oh my, I climbed more mountains. But, we probably ran twice as far as our parents too. But it was fun because we were going on an adventure. It was exciting. But then in the wintertime, when the weather was inclement,
Which in Oregon is usually about
October,
November 1 to April 30.
Yeah.
No, not really.
It
There are
has its
days
moments.
certainly you don't get out of the house.
But being able to have other things. We had, Sabbath coloring. We had games, Bible games.
Did you ever bake special things on Sabbath?
Did we ever bake special things?
Yeah. That were Sabbath baked, so to speak?
Oh, well, my mother was a big preparer. We prepared on Friday. And while they did bake on Sabbath for us to eat, we had casserole number 1, casserole number 2, casserole number 3.
And then the surprise casserole?
No, we didn't have a surprise. But each one of us as girls, we each had one. And those were things that my mom did to make Sabbath different, to allow it to be a little bit different. We had Sabbath dishes. Not that we were Jewish and had kosher plates, but We had special china that was Sabbath. We had things that made Sabbath different and made it special for us. And I think about now we're about convenience and, expediency. And perhaps we've lost some of that.
Well, I love doing the dishes on Sabbath because of late we've been using decorative, festive, holiday paper plates. I love doing the dishes on Sabbath. I always volunteer when we're done with lunch.
So
I'll do the
generous.
dishes.
Yeah. Okay, so let's
Well,
look
before we
at,
go on to Thursday, though,
Okay.
I would draw your attention to the very last bold type sentences at the bottom of page 100 in the regular quarterly. What about your own Sabbath keeping? Have you turned it into a day of the don't do this and don't do that, rather than a time to truly rest in the Lord and know Him better? If so, how can you change so that you can get from it what God intends for you? That might be the hard thing sometimes, depending upon, of course, how you were brought up to
yeah.
keep the Sabbath, so to speak.
Well, I was looking at the what motivates us to do that, and the Teachers Quarterly really brings out a very interesting idea. If we're talking about Sabbath, and especially if we're trying to change maybe habits back to where the purpose of Sabbath lives, there's likely to be resistance. And the lesson talks about how in some evangelical groups, it's, if you do this, you'll burn in hellfire. And that motivation of, I don't want that to happen, so I'll do this, having a negative annihilationist is what they talk about.
It's just not
To have-
evangelical. It's also true in many, many other Christian denominations.
That's true. But looking at that idea of, if you do this, you're going to burn. And if you do this, then you get to go to heaven. And it's one or the other, and there's nothing between. It's just you're either on this side or this side. I was thinking about Grandma and how, she went to a Quaker college, and they were talking about hell and how, every hair on your head.
Wasn't it Milton's recollection,
Yes.
Writing in
Well,
Paradise Lost?
they were comparing it with that. But looking at that concept of your fingernails hurt,
Well, not hurt.
every
They're
cell.
peeling up. It's so hot, and your skin is melting away,
Yeah.
and all your hair is singed. This is the dead of winter. It is the Depression era. World War II is going on, or just after World War II. So things are cold. Their temperatures are turned down. She's sitting by a drafty window. She's got her collar up. Tell the whole story, dear.
Well, you're doing a fine
Well,
job.
thank you.
Anyway, as she's listening, the professor who knew she was Adventist said, Mrs. Winter, does this bother you, this description?
Of hell.
And she goes, well, no, it would have to be something other than hot to bother me on a day like today. And that poor man,
She says the expression on his face, he looked at her like, she's going there? And she's flippant about it, too.
Yes. And, we often think about, why do we teach negative things about Sabbath? Oh, you can't do that on Sabbath. Rather than putting it into a positive way of, here are things, we do that on an ordinary day. Let's do this on Sabbath.
Again, it's your framing. It's how you're going to present it. And
Exactly.
That's true with everything. It's the spin. It's always the spin. But I think that kind of has negative. But yes, Sabbath is a special day, so let's make it special. We don't want to do ordinary things.
But there's a italic part of this that I want to read because
Go right ahead.
I was so taken with it. So it's about education. Remember, that's this thing, this
whole quarter.
Seventh-day Adventist evangelism, and by extension, education, is uniquely compelled to discover the heart of God. I like that. Discover the heart of God, so as to present Him in a way in which people are drawn rather than psychologically forced. If we have to depend on eternal torture to motivate people to do right, we've lost sight of the heart of
Well,
God.
they're not doing right for right's sake.
Yeah. The heart of God says we do
If
it
you
because
love me,
we love.
keep my commandments.
Yes.
You'll know you're my disciples by your love.
And so if we look at that, you know, even in any relationship, you know, when we were little, my mom would say, don't do that. Oh, you'll get a spank. And, yeah, I probably got a few of those. Yeah.
No, dear.
But when I think about it, is that the only reason I don't do it now as an adult? Because my mom might spank me. No, it's because I've learned not to do that. I've grown up. I've been educated to not do that. But when we look at that concept, why are we doing this? Are we searching for the heart of God? And how do we share that heart of God? That goes to Thursday's lesson.
A time for community. You know, I think perhaps if nothing else comes from our time here because of COVID-19, it'll be how much the sense of community in church has been lost temporarily, because this will come to an end. And when we gather again, maybe it'll be different, because we'll realize how good it really is.
Yeah.
For whatever time we have left before Jesus returns, how good it truly is. And so we maybe we'll get a little glimpse into what it was like for the early Christians. Because here they were, really done with the judistic Levitical system, because it all pointed to Christ. It all pointed to Jesus. And here he was. He fulfilled it all. So now we do what he taught. As he said, make disciples of all men, teaching them what I have taught you, baptizing them, teaching them.
And talking about Sabbath, you know, so often they looked back on Sabbath and said, look at what he did on Sabbath. Maybe that's what we need to be patterning our lives after.
In fact, the lesson points out the big chunk there in Thursday's lessons, right in the middle, about all the activities in Acts, the book of Acts, chapter 14, 16, and 17. And each of those verses talks about, and Peter and Silas, and Peter and Paul, and whoever it might have been. I'm sorry, I don't remember who exactly was. I didn't jot it down here. Every Sabbath went to the synagogue. And what amazed me, one of them, I think the longest one, there in verse Acts 13, 14 to 45, it says they went and taught, or they went to the synagogue on Sabbath, and then they read from the law and the prophets, and then the leader asked, I think it was Paul, to, what's news? What's the news, Paul? What do you have to tell us? And so he told them, and he gave a history, so to speak, of the nation and the Messiah. And they were amazed that the whole church, so to speak, followed. And the next Sabbath they were there again, but the whole town came out. And it was such a large gathering, a large group that were praising God and celebrating, that the Jewish leaders became jealous.
Yeah.
And it happens in another place, and another place, and another place. That's each mentioned in Acts 16 and Acts 17 and Acts 18. And it's the same repeated pattern, because they went to the synagogue every Sabbath for community.
It's in that we see and if they don't receive you well, dust your shoes off and go on. Because there are going to be people who are going to be looking for this truth. And I think in today's world, my dad was talking about a neighbor. They have recently moved from Walla Walla back to the Oregon City area, Milwaukee. Anyway, Dad's neighbor, they were talking, and the guy made a comment, you're a Christian, right? And Dad said, yeah. And so they've been having conversations about different aspects of Christianity, and, well, what religion, do you ascribe to? And Dad's comment was, I'm a Seventh-day Adventist, because Sabbath is special. And the man has had questions, and he's, Dad will make a few comments, but the man has been reading on his own and then coming back and questioning. And Dad said it kind of keeps him on his toes because he never knows exactly what the guy's going to ask. But it has allowed Dad to have an opportunity to share God.
But let me guess, your
we-
dad and he were friends first before this came about, right?
Well,
Maybe not first, but they made an acquaintance, and they didn't
Yes.
start talking right away. Oh, what did you you worship God?
Yeah.
See, it's that relationship that's going to
big.
do it.
Yeah.
It's again that community. They feel safe in each other's
Yeah.
presence to query, to question, to talk, to share.
And when we begin to realize that in our own lives, we all have a testimony. We have things that we can tell about that we have experienced with God. But we don't think about them so that we can be ready to answer and respond. But if we think of something and we ask God, give me an opportunity to share this, you can bet that God is going
Watch
to do
out
that.
what you pray for, because you might just get it.
It's
You
true.
might just get it.
And as Adventists, we have a strong history. We have people know us. I was downtown Portland one time going to my favorite bookstore, which with COVID it went out of business. I'm very
What?
sad.
Pals is out of business?
That's what I've heard.
I don't believe it.
Anyway, but it made me so sad because this woman came up to me and, she asked me for money, and I didn't have a lot of money. I try not to carry money downtown. And I had a couple bucks, and so I gave them to her. I said, but you do know that you can call the local Adventist church. Oh, yes, the Seventh-day Adventists, they're the nicest people. I've gotten help from them before. And I thought,
What a testimony,
wow, that's amazing that she knew that about. And wouldn't that be wonderful if it weren't just like Adventists, but that these are Christian people who love God and carry his name?
Well, and I think that in that respect, as the lesson finishes out in Friday's portion, what stood out to me the most is the dead center of the quote there from Desire of Ages. But in order to keep the Sabbath holy, men must themselves be holy. We have to set aside ourselves from our daily business, from our daily thoughts, our daily routines, and make Sabbath truly a holy day. And, that's, by doing that, I thought, and maybe I read it in the lesson, I don't remember, but I said, oh, then there's a link between the Sabbath and salvation. Because to keep Sabbath holy, we must be holy.
And to be holy means that we are back to the original.
We're set aside for God's purposes.
Well, but we're
And it's
also
unique.
allowing ourselves to be whole, meaning to be in tune with, to be one with God,
Well, and that was
as He
salvation,
intended us
to atone.
be.
At
Yeah.
1 month. At 1 month.
Yes.
Atonement is a Greek word. Those two base words, and then the suffix meant, which changes the verb atone to a noun, atonement.
Yeah.
And that's what Sabbath is all about.
Yeah.
And God knew that and planned for it
Yeah.
in creating us and creating the Sabbath. And then I find it, the thought just struck me how interesting that is. It says, Sabbath was created for man because God knew we would need to have that to truly be with Him in our sinful nature.
But also knowing that He, as Lord of the Sabbath, it was about coming back to Him. That I'm coming back to the heart of worship. That's all about it.
It's all about you. Capital Y.
Yeah.
All about you. Capital Y, referring to God. May this truly be a holy day for you as you continue to worship in the 11 o'clock service. Let's close with prayer. Dear Jesus, Creator God, Savior, and friend, we thank you for creating Sabbath for us. Way before we truly needed it, you knew we would, so you created it. as your crowning, completing act of creation in that creation week. May we truly take from this lesson the remembrances of what you want Sabbath to be for us, and in turn make it truly a holy day that we can come together and find atonement to be at one-ment with you as we recreate on the blessed Sabbath day. Keep this ever forefront in our mind. Impress upon our hearts how we desperately need that time with you. And keep us safe, I pray, until we're able to meet in person or talk to on the phone or whatever the case might be and reconnect with each other. All these things I ask in your precious name. Amen.
Happy Sabbath.
Have a wonderful week.